Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for WandaVision Season 1 on Disney Plus. And overall, I enjoyed this series. Now, it originally was supposed to be 6 episodes, and then was extended to 9 episodes. And that kind of affects how I see what's going on with the show because, granted, even though we understand that there's more than what's going on, uh, I think that they play around with the sitcom bit a little bit too much. It is explained why Wanda kind of latched onto the sitcoms and everything like that for what was going on in this town of Westview. But I just feel that they kind of played it too much in doing the sitcom thing. I don't know. It's not that it was completely bad, but we have to wait till the fourth episode to get a real kind of grip of what's going on, and then it kind of evens out a little bit better. I don't mind waiting for what's going on, but the thing is, we're dealing with all this stuff that I'm like, okay, yeah, it's kind of cool to kind of see like sitcom kind of shit done in the Marvel universe, but I'm more interested in the what I will term the quote unquote second, the reverse mirror kind of story that's actually going on. So, the first 3 episodes pretty much deal with okay, we see Wanda and Vision pretty much reenacting different sitcoms. Dick Van Dyke Show pretty much in the first one, Bewitched in the second one, then pretty much kind of like the Brady Bunch in the third one, as we start going through different decades, like the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s, late 90s, 2000s, throughout this whole thing. It does become important of like to link to Wanda's mental state and everything, but until that point, you just kind of see weird, wacky kind of sitcom shit that would happen. Like in the first one, they've got a dinner that's going to be with Vision's boss that they kind of have to work around, but you have like all the weird kind of shit going on where like his boss is kind of like choking, and Vision doesn't is kind of like what the fuck's going on, and Wanda tells him to help him, and he's able to like get the thing out. And we see all this kind of stuff, but we see this one character, Agnes, kind of popping up throughout the whole thing, thinking, okay, there's something going on with her as well. We do find that out. Let's see. Then they kind of shift forward, and we see the whole kind of thing shifting. We also get interesting kind of like Marvel commercials of the decades interspersed in here. Now, it doesn't like take up the whole thing, it's like an intermission kind of in between, but those are kind of interesting to see as well. Um, then, of course, there's kind of a talent show. And the second one that they got to deal with, that Vision accidentally swallows some gum and it makes him all kind of loopy and he's revealing their powers because in the beginning they were hiding their powers as much as possible from the townspeople. I think thinking that one would be like, yeah, that'd probably be the best kind of option, but then progressively she starts doing more and more shit. And the thing is, we're like, okay, this Vision's kind of acting like Vision. Well, but who is he really? What's kind of going on here? Then at the end of the second episode, we kind of get Wanda turning pregnant. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? And this is like happening super quick. Each of these things is almost like a day kind of thing going on, give or take, because we're not explicitly told what's going on until we get kind of in the fourth episode. And we get introduced in the second episode to this Geraldine character, and she pops in as well. She becomes important. So, Wanda's kind of dealing with her being pregnant, it's making her powers go kind of haywire, and shit's kind of going nutty. And, of course, the doctor's like, oh, she's fine and everything, but, of course, she then starts going into labor, and Geraldine is there to kind of help her out, and, of course, she gives birth to the kids, and Geraldine starts bringing up stuff with Ultron and Pietro, and it starts freaking her out, and she goes kind of back into normal kind of mode, because up until this point, we've seen Wanda acting as Wanda in a sitcom, if that makes sense, not actually as the Wanda Maximoff character that we've seen in the movies. I mean, there's bits and elements within there, but once she starts hearing the stuff with that, she's like, "Who the fuck are you?" And she's like, I." We've also seen kind of weird stuff popping up, like a strange helicopter for some reason, like a mini RC helicopter popping up. This dude in a bee costume that is like, "What the fuck's up with that?" Before Wanda like resets what's going on reality wise. Here, she's like, "I think you should leave," and we see that Geraldine gets like shot out of Westview, and that we start kind of understanding what's going on with the fourth episode as we get all the information we need, and you could term it a plot dump, but we kind of needed this information, this reveal. I tend to lean on more this side of it's more of a reveal for the mystery, even though it's taken a while. It's like we kind of need this information, and boom, okay, cool. But I can totally understand someone going, yeah, this is kind of a plot dump, and then the rest kind of, there's another kind of plot dump that happens. I think my issue of not going after it harder as a plot dump is that we kind of need that information, and I've seen it done more horribly in other shows to where I'm like, okay, this isn't as bad as I've seen something going on, and I kind of have it more as a kind of reveal for shit that's going to become important. So we find out that the Geraldine character is the daughter of Rambo. Not Sylvester Stallone's Rambo, but in Captain Marvel, one of Danvers' friends was Rambo, and she had a daughter, Monica. This is the same daughter. And this is important because we actually get repercussions for the snap / the blip. Because Monica actually was snapped out of existence and then came back. The timeline of what's going on with WandaVision is it's set 3 weeks after Endgame. That's important because Spider-Man Far From Home is set 8 months. So this happens before everything goes on with Spider-Man. So it could link up to stuff that's going on with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which this is kind of leading into. But the thing is, it's important that the Marvel Universe actually acknowledges shit that's going on with the blip and the whole snap, and we actually get that in this episode. So I have to give a kind of standout for them actually dealing with that and kind of working our way into all the rest of the things that are kind of going on. Because she was in the hospital and her mother had had surgery for cancer. And she comes back, she's like, "What's going on? Where's my mom? She was doing all right." And she's like, "She died. The cancer came back." And she's like, "What?" And all the timeline, because it was a 5-year gap, and her just freaking out, then coming back to SWORD. Sentient Weapons Observation and Research Division. Or Reconnaissance. I think it's research, yeah. And they're usually more dealt with space, but evidently Hayward, who came into effect of like taking over the director role and everything, and evidently having one fucking huge ass chip on his shoulder for everything that had gone on after the whole hullabaloo of the snap and being like, superheroes can get fucked. Granted, I kind of amped this shit up to that way, but the thing is that as everything goes on, Hayward pretty much antagonizes Wanda to a point of like making her do certain shit so that way they can like utilize Vision or whatnot. It's like, sweet Jesus, you dumb fuck. Eat it. But Monica's back. She wants to do something and everything. She wants to actually go into space because that's kind of like her deal. But he's like, no, we kind of have to make sure everything's kind of working out. Make sure. Now, granted, they didn't go as in depth in this, but I would have liked to have brought up. We kind of want to make sure that you're actually you, because we have just learned that we are not alone in the universe. There are fundamental forces that can be harnessed to pretty much wipe out life on a scale that is heretofore been unimaginable, and we don't even know if you're actually you and where you fucking came back from. So, whoo, that would have been a kind of doozy thing, but no, they're pretty much like trying to ease her back in, which I'm like, yeah, okay. So evidently, Jimmy Woo, who we've seen dealing with stuff in like the Ant-Man movies, most with like Ant-Man and the Wasp, where he was pretty much the FBI agent checking in on Scott Lang. He was sent to Westview to deal with like one of his like witness protection people, and shit's going kind of funky with Westview. It's like, what the fuck's going on? Monica Rambeau's like, what the fuck? what's going on with this? She, of course, got sucked in and fucking racked out. And it's like, what the fuck? And then she gets shot back out. Another kind of cool cameo, not cameo, but like important character that we get is Darcy. She was in the first 2 Thor movies as pretty much the intern / research assistant of Jane Foster. And she was actually kind of an interesting kind of comic relief, but she kind of comes into her own here as pretty much being, she's gotten her doctorate in astrophysics, and she's been brought in to see what's going on with the whole, they dubbed the hex because it's hexagonal to what Wanda has done around Westview. And of course it's got like cosmic microwave background radiation and everything like that. It's like, that could be leading to like stuff with like the power cosmic. That's important with most kind of intergalactic things on the side of the Marvel Universe, and definitely the power cosmic is important with the Fantastic Four. We don't get any of the Fantastic Four in here, but we'll kind of see how it kind of shakes out. But she is the one that kind of like finds that it's like tuned into like pretty much a old school TV station as they're like working out what's kind of going on and actually observing what's happening. They get Monica back and find out that her going in and out of that stuff, the hex has started to change her on a fundamental level, and they're like, listen, you don't want to go back in there. And of course, Monica has kind of developed a kind of connection with Wanda because of their kind of shared grief of what's going on with how they've lost their loved ones and trying to kind of move on and move kind of forward. And of course, Wanda is not really moving forward. She's made her own kind of alternate kind of reality, at least that we're seeing at this point, to try and get the Vision back for herself. And Monica wants to kind of help her and stop what's kind of going on. She's the only one who's essentially like, let's not try and kill her. Let's try and kind of like talk with her and figure out what's going, doing it in a non-violent way. Now, granted, I don't believe that if it got to a point where she needed to employ violence to stop violence, she wouldn't do that. But she's not fucking gunning on it at the first drop. And we find out that like the helicopter that we saw was like a drone. The dude who was a beekeeper was a dude that was pretty much sending like, "Hee-ho, motherfucker," as his like hazmat suit was turned into a beekeeper thing. He's like, the fuck is going on here? And the one's like, wah, and he's like, what? Let's see. So that's the kind of info drop we get. They're trying to figure out what's going on. And eventually gets to pretty much the 80s kind of version. Her kids pretty much age up to 5 and then get like the whole thing with the dog and everything. Vision is starting to figure out that things are going fucking wrong because he's able to pretty much get people out of Wanda's control using essentially what I would deem, it's gold and it's kind of reminiscent of dealing with like the Mind Stone power, and that works and is actually kind of explained as it's kind of going on. So we then see these things kind of running in tandem. Monica does call in somebody to try and get something that would essentially be like a nuclear fallout bunker that is mobile to trying to get into Westview. And the thing is that she's tried to do that with Jimmy at one point, and of course Hayward is like, screw you motherfuckers. And there's one important bit that's going on in this part that we need to acknowledge. They say that they are tracking the decaying vibranium body of Vision throughout this. As we get towards the end, that doesn't make any sense because Vision's body isn't in there. Even though we see that Wanda's freaking out as she sees Vision in his dead form, she also sees this with another character that's brought in that's important, but it doesn't really pan out other than it's just freaking her out, and her powers are kind of just like try to, I guess, acclimate one reality or the other. That's a big important thing that's like a plot hole thing that I'm like, that should have been thought about better. So that's a big criticism for what I'm going for. Let's see. Well, the thing is, they caught up with the 80s, so they fucking fish out an 80s drone to try and, like, send in to take out Wanda. The thing is, this is going on while she's trying to find the boy's dog. Vision is trying to figure out what the fuck is actually going on with the town, and he's trying to figure out what Wanda's doing. Well, Wanda almost got destroyed. Well, not almost destroyed, but the drone's like, I'm gonna blow you up. And she's like, the fuck you do? And we have seen throughout the franchise that Wanda is one of the most powerful superheroes, beings in here because of what her kind of powers are. Now, granted, we've learned everything, and everything's kind of retconned to be kind of more comic accurate, but it's a retcon that works. But she pretty much takes the thing out and tells him to leave her the fuck alone. As she throws that, pretty much gets Hayward at the gun points of his people, and then walks back into the hex. It's like, yeah, you don't want to fuck with that. So then we shift forward towards like the Malcolm in the Middle kind of era, and it's kind of like Halloween. We do get a kind of interesting look of like Wanda's kind of early comics costume, and she's like, I'm a Sokovian fortune teller, and Vision's kind of dressed up like a weird ass luchador. And the thing is, at the end of the previous episode, we'd seen that her brother Pietro had popped up, but it is played by the actor that played Quicksilver in the Fox version of Quicksilver. So it's like, what the fuck's going on here? Spoiler alert, it doesn't really amount to much. It's just they're kind of messing with you to see what kind of things are going on. He's, of course, playing the kind of unruly brother, uncle kind of thing that pops up. So he kind of helps Wanda take the kids around, does the whole kind of mischief kind of thing. We see that the kids that they have their different kind of powers. Tommy and Billy. Tommy's the speedster kind of one, kind of similar to Pietro. Billy has kind of magic powers similar to Wanda. His are blue though. Usually whenever he's using anything, it's got a tinge of blue. So we'll have to kind of see how that kind of works out. That's important because they both become Young Avengers, codenamed Wiccan and Speed. So that's kind of cool kind of setup that we'll kind of see how that kind of works out. So they're doing that. Vision is pretty much going around to kind of see what's going on because it's essential. It's really kind of cool because Wanda is almost what I would call a video game director in what's going on. And I don't mean like director actually making the game. I'm talking like the AI director where she's able to kind of have everybody doing everything. Because at certain times, people buck up and like, I can do that a little bit better. I can do that differently or whatnot, as we then learn later on how Wanda's kind of like controlling these people. Even going now to introduce kids and stuff because she's got, of course, kids and they're going to need their kind of people to kind of play with. So essentially think of Vision as that dude who tries to get out of the map and understand like what's kind of going on because he's going pretty much to the edges where Wanda isn't in the immediate kind of vicinity to kind of control them, and they're just kind of standing around or doing weird kind of shit and doing over and over again. It's like, oh shit, what happens to those NPCs when you're not doing shit with them? This. What the fuck? Of course, he runs into Agnes, and he, of course, unblocks her from the mind control. She's like, you're dead, freaking out. And like, why am I fucking dead? Of course, he tries to get out of Westview and tries to get help for the people, but he, of course, is falling apart and being ripped apart. Billy, of course, starts to understand this and feel this and says, Mom, we need help. And, of course, Pietro is trying to, like, grill her for information. She's like, fuck that noise. Sees him kind of, like, go dead and kind of like her brother, and she pushes him away, and, of course, she expands out the hex. This is important because Darcy was trying to help Jimmy, and Monica were kind of out, kind of getting into her other group of people trying to help her get back into Westview to help Wanda. Thing is, Hayward's able to kind of get out, and he's being kind of dick mode and trying to figure out other kind of things to do. But it expands enough to take a good chunk of his forces, Darcy and all that, as it starts building towards the kind of end game goal. We get towards the last couple episodes, we get to the kind of Modern Family kind of office thing where Wanda's acting kind of nutty, breaking kind of the fourth wall kind of shit. Agnes kind of takes the boys to kind of just do their own kind of thing, while Wanda just kind of works her own way, and Vision tries to figure out what to do as he deals with the carnival and is able to wake up Darcy, and Wanda pretty much tries to stymie Vision on his way back to figure out what's going on with her. She, of course, then is kind of doing her own thing before Monica is able to burst her way through to Westview and tries to talk to Wanda. This is important because Monica does become a superhero in her own right, and I think her name was like Photon. And she pretty much gets powers after she goes through that last time into Westview, and we see it where their eyes blue, and we see it later on. But she's trying to kind of like get Wanda to get herself out of this, to kind of help her. She talks about her mom dying and understanding the grief and everything that's going on, and nobody's really helping her. She's got all these powers and abilities, and nobody's really trying to help her deal with all of this grief. Because, remember, she dealt with the death of her brother at the Age of Ultron. And then, in Infinity War, she murdered the person she loved. Well, not murdered, but he asked her to take out the Mind Stone, and she did that to destroy it, and that killed him. And then he got brought back, and then he was killed again, and making the sacrifice null and void. And she was snapped out of existence for 5 years, and it's only been 3 weeks, and she's still trying to deal with all of this loss. So, yeah, that also comes important kind of later. But Agnes kind of like shuts her down and kind of takes Wanda her own way. We don't see the boys in Agnes's house, and then Wanda's trying to wander around. She gets into the bottom, and we learned that Agnes is actually the character of Agatha Harkness, an important kind of witch within the Marvel Universe. Now here she's more in the kind of villainous role, and the thing is, her shit's not really explained that well, because we just explained that she's behind all the weirder kind of shit going on. Not the weirder shit. She's not involved with all this stuff getting changed and everything, but she's like, oh yeah, Wanda, you can't use your powers in here because I cast these runes to do all this. That becomes important later on. But she wants to know what's going up with her, and we essentially go through all of Wanda's life as a kind of retcon to understand what's going on. So we see that as a child, her and her family would watch sitcoms and everything kind of to learn English, and that shows her affinity for the sitcoms and why everything's kind of going the way it is. Okay, cool, I get that. Then, of course, we see that her parents are pretty much killed during the civil unrest in Sokovia by something from Stark Industries, and Agatha's pretty much explaining that, oh, it's a probability hex. You're born a little witch. And it's like, okay, because up until this point we thought that the Infinity Stone had bequeathed like powers or unlocked these powers within Wanda. Evidently that's not the case. She was born with magic, and it even like saved her and her brother's life. And we also got a little bit of background stuff with Agatha, where we went into 1693, and her mother was like, you've been doing dark magic shit, so we're gonna like strip you of your shit. But she kind of like reversed it on them and sucked in all their powers, so that's important because she's looking for the same kind of thing. She's wanting to know how Wanda's all able to do these kind of things. So, continuing on the journey, we shift over and we see what's going on with Hydra. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of weird that, yeah, you survive that kind of stuff and then join kind of like fascist kind of organization like Hydra or terrorist cell kind of shit. Well, they put her in contact with the Mind Stone, and they kind of connected on a level, and Agatha even explains that normally your powers probably would have died on the Vine, but the Mind Stone amplified them. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And she saw this thing of like her in her kind of Scarlet Witch kind of form. We shift over to pretty much like Age of Ultron. After Pietro died, we see that Vision comes in to try and comfort her, talking about how grief is like love persevering, and it's kind of beautiful in a way, as she's watching Malcolm in the Middle kind of episode. Let's see. And in each case, we see that she's watching certain kind of things, because after the Mind Stone incident and Hydra being like, how the fuck did this work? Because we see her have this whole kind of episode with the Mind Stone and kind of amplifying her power. They just see her like up and then fucking drop like a rock, and then they put her in some other place where she's like watching a kind of sitcom. Okay, so her and Vision have a nice kind of moment and everything, and it's really kind of cool to humanize Wanda more, get more information on like her kind of emotional state and what was kind of going on with her relationship with Vision. Let's see. Then we get towards the end point of what was going on. We see that she went to Sword because she wanted to lay Vision to rest. Because up until this point, it had been kind of teased that she like blasted her way into Sword, took Vision's body, and that's what's going on. Evidently, that's not the case. She went in, she wanted to lay Vision to rest and kind of get closure for herself. And they're fucking like hacking his shit apart to try and learn what's going on with him. Of course, Hayward's pretty much trying to put her in there to see what's kind of going to go on. She's pissed off and kind of breaks in there and tries to use her magic to kind of bring him back to life, and it doesn't work. So, of course, she then leaves with a piece of paper, and we find out that Vision had bought a plot of land for them to have a house. And, of course, this just keeps compounding her grief and everything before her powers go kind of out of control and start building the house. And also, we see a yellow portion like the power of the Mind Stone, which kind of brings me into a certain bit of, okay, these Infinity Gems are physical manifestations of certain things. I wonder if the Mind Stone is attempting to try and like keep itself in play, potentially forge itself in kind of living in Wanda like this. But that's the vision that we see in Westview, this kind of Mind Stone enhanced kind, not Mind Stone enhanced, but Mind Stone powered energy thing that she's able to make. Think of it almost like a soul kind of recreation of Vision, if that makes sense, because that becomes important as it goes on. And since Agatha's now got her information and she's like, Wanda's trying to figure out what's going on, she goes outside, and of course she's all on her like witchy kind of regalia. She does a really good witch laugh, okay? Which really, if you're gonna play a kind of witch character, she fucking nails it. I really like the actress that does Agatha Harkness. She just plays the creepy kind of like sitcom kind of thing going on, and then the whole witch kind of thing very well. But she's like grabbed the kids in these kind of like energy ropes, and they're like, Wanda, you use chaos magic, you're a Scarlet Witch. And of course that's bringing that kind of thing in. It's like, oh, she said the words and stuff, and I'm like, it's important because chaos magic is a fucking crazy ass thing. I mean, Wanda has essentially rewritten reality and shit, and like recreated the one that she loved and created 2 children. Alright? And she's able to kind of change these things up like that. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. Because we get into towards like the last episode, and she's like, you're stronger than the Sorcerer Supreme. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like the whole goal of like what is the kind of magic source that she's got. Because which kind of begs the question of why Agatha wants like her power source, because I mean, granted, yeah, that's an phenomenal cosmic power, but Wanda's been born with it and only has kind of rudimentary control of it. I mean, fuck, you'd be taking it and not understanding how to fucking work it and probably turn yourself inside out. Best case scenario. But she's explaining how, like, she's not even really using incantations or anything like that. Yeah, she's not. It's like instinct and talent to just do certain things. Imagine what she could do if she learned certain things. Because Agatha's using the Darkhold, which we've seen in like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and I believe The Runaways. I have not watched that, so this is kind of a different version, but it's actually got a whole chapter dedicated to the Scarlet Witch, and evidently that the Scarlet Witch needs to be forged, which does happen. While this is going on, Hayward, the fucknut that he is, decided to piece together the dead Vision, which encounters that whole plot hole I mentioned before, and uses the mojo juice from the downed drone to juice him up. Now, I don't understand how that would kind of work. I mean, granted, if Wanda was doing that kind of shit with his head, you would think he'd get some kind of reaction, but it doesn't make sense of why it would work now when he's pieced together. Because you need a vast, more a bigger quantity of that shit. And Vision, the original Vision, was powered pretty much by a lightning blast from an Asgardian god and was connected to an Infinity Stone. I wouldn't have. It would have been fucking hilarious if they're like, send in this white Vision! Because that brokers into the comics because Vision had died before and was resurrected as a whole white version. And that's important because it shows, like, he doesn't have all what he was before. This is an entirely new Vision. It would have been funny if he had, like, taken 3 steps and fucking fell down on the floor because we don't know what the power sources he would have needed to do those kind of things. But what occurs is that, okay, Vision pops up and then White Vision pops up. It's like, holy fucking shit. Wanda's trying to, like, deal with Agatha, but she's kind of, like, absorbing her powers as well. She gets the boys to, like, go away and hide off for a little bit. We see White Vision pop up, and it's like, Wanda. And you think that it's like, oh, you recognize her, and then tries to squish her face. But then our regular Vision pops up and starts battling it out with him. And they do pretty well with the action scenes in this, I think. Now, granted, we've got a lot of different people popping off and around, so we don't get as much stuff going on as would be needed, but we do see Vision doing all the different kind of phase shifting powers and different kind of energy beams from their respective places. Even though White Vision does not have a stone, he's still able to somehow channel energy from his, like, weird space, where that stone would be. We needed a little bit more explanation on that kind of stuff. Alright. I enjoyed it still, but it's like the amount of energy and shit that he was going through, honestly, with the amount, I mean, they had to have had, like, precisely a metric fuck ton of chaos energy to fucking power this thing. And it's fine, it's just more kind of like annoying. It's like, you've done better. So, Wanda's trying to figure out how to handle them. She, of course, gets blasted to a point where Agatha's, like, talking about everything about the Scarlet Witch and all that. She's like, just give me all your powers and shit like that. Ha 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 ha. And she's able to kind of get the residents out of their thing, and of course it's freaking her out. And they're like, please let me see my kids. And evidently her grief and all of her pain had been put onto them as well. And they're like, please, please. And they're, of course, overloading her, and she accidentally, reflexively tells them to stop, and they've got things on them, and they're like, listen, let us go or kill us, please. And she, of course, it's really weird because you would think that that would be a supervillain thing to do, but Wanda is not consciously doing this, and when she sees that she is hurting these people, she wants to stop and let them go. And, of course, she's like, go ahead, leave, and is able to open up parts of the hex. Of course, Hayward then tries to go in. They're pretty much doing all that kind of stuff. We get to a point where, of course, their family kind of gets together, the boys and Vision and Wanda. Monica got, like, jacked by Pietro, who's evidently Ralph Boner, and that it isn't another kind of Pietro pull from the multiverse. Agatha was just using some kind of, like, mind control possession spell on him. And it was really kind of weird because Monica was gone for such a little bit. And I was like, what the fuck's going on? And she is able to overpower him and, like, break his things. Like, what the fuck's going on? Because she does pop up to kind of help the kids out. Because Billy's able to stop them with his magic, and Speed's able to kind of disarm them. But Hayward then pulls out a gun and tries to shoot at him. And Monica uses her powers to stop the bullets' momentum. Like, they go through her, but she's able to use... We don't get a complete understanding of her powers, but she's able to kind of, like, phase shift kind of similarly to Vision. It doesn't work exactly, I don't believe, because I don't think Vision could stop the momentum of them. Like he could phase shift and the bullets could go through him. But they go through her as a kind of almost like a liquid thing, and she's able to kind of help him out. Hayward, of course, tries to escape, but then Darcy pops up at the last minute and fucking cracks sack into him to kind of stop him, because he's essentially doing shit that would set up potentially like the Sentinels, because he's fucking shitty on superheroes, and that's just a leap and a step to making Sentinel kind of things to go after mutants. I mean, you know. Wanda is doing her whole kind of thing against Agatha. We'll get back to that in a minute. But we get this whole bit of like the ship of Theseus kind of thing. You see them people talking about that, but it's actually a kind of cool thing, because the Visions are kind of like talking with each other, and the closest to the real Visions, like, have you heard of the ship of Theseus thought experiment? About like, okay, you've got this ship of Theseus. If you replace things that have like rotted out and everything, eventually, would it still be the ship of Theseus? Or if you took all the boards that you had removed and replaced, took all the rot and rebuilt the ship, is that the ship of Theseus? And of course they're like, they're both and they're neither, because that's important with what's going on with these Visions here. Granted, we essentially get a thing where a character is killed and brought back, but whereas with Gamora is pretty much a time displaced one, this one is like, could potentially have a lot of different ways of how it's played, because this Vision's objective is to destroy Vision, which would essentially be destroying himself eventually. He's like, listen, you've got all the memories and all that, and we essentially almost get a fusion kind of thing. He's able to unlock the White Vision's memories and everything, because they couldn't access it or couldn't destroy them. They could probably keep him from accessing them, but he gets them, and we see his face change to a more kind of human and normal kind of Vision thing. And he's like, all right, and then he just leaves. That's all we know. So White Vision is out there, and we'll have to see kind of how that works out. Well, that's going on. We see that Wanda is dealing with Agatha, and she's pretty much at the beginning looking like that she's just firing off things indiscriminately while Agatha's taking her powers, but it gets to a point where we see that she turned the tables on her and had done the rune kind of trick to where she couldn't use it, and then takes all the power back from her and stops her, and of course goes into full Scarlet Witch mode, which is kind of cool, because we had seen her like kind of tiara crown thing, headdress. I'm gonna go with headdress, kind of energy wise, but she even gets an outfit that is a nice kind of modernization of what her usual kind of one looks like. And the thing is, she lets all the other people go, but she puts Agatha in that kind of spot of where she puts her, no, I'm not going to kill you, and we have a villain that is still in the, like, still here, but she's, like, trapped in a sitcom kind of thing. She's like, yeah, I'll know where to find you then. And it's like, oh, God. And she, of course, does all this kind of stuff. It's like, not does all this kind of stuff, but she acts like that whole sitcom Agnes kind of thing, and it's like, she understands what doing that can kind of do to a person, but she's, like, not caring about the other people that are around in Westview, and wants to just suck up all this chaos energy, and we don't even know what she would have used it for. Now Wanda's like, okay, I'm now at like my true form, I need to figure out what's kind of going on with this. Of course, she has the poignant goodbye of saying goodbye to her kids in the house, and saying goodbye to Vision. I mean, like, yeah, you're like my hope, my love, and all that kind of stuff, and the Mind Stone, as she brings back in the Hex, and everything kind of goes away. We see Hayward arrested. We see everybody kind of like back in their way. She, of course, has a nice heart-to-heart with Monica, where she's like, I don't think they'll understand. And Monica's like, listen, if I had your powers, I'd bring my mom back too. And it's nice that she has a conversation with someone that understands she wasn't attempting to hurt people and trying to kind of correct it as much as possible. And understanding that if she does not get her handle on her powers, problems are going to ensue like this. And it's like that. Then we get kind of two stinger kind of credit scenes at the end where someone's like, hey, Monica, Captain Rambo, we need to talk to you in here. Of course, it goes into the theater. this person changes himself into a Skrull and says, "Hey, Nick Fury kind of want to help you. Need your help." Kind of like up there, leading of course to the stinger of Far From Home, where Nick Fury's in space dealing with things, because I don't think Nick Fury would have tolerated what Hayward was doing, and well, like he was back there long enough to be like Hayward, because we don't know his complete and utter connections of what's going on with Sword and if he's completely appraised with things. But evidently, he's got Skrull people going around and allies keeping tabs on what is going on, and it's evidently been resolved to a way that he doesn't need to be there. Then we get to that last bit, and we see that Wanda was moved to some kind of like secluded house somewhere, is like sitting on the porch kind of drinking tea, but then we see in the back room that she's able to astral project and walk around at the same time as she is researching the Darkhold and learning how to control her powers more. Now, it makes sense that she would be using the Darkhold for that kind of thing, because chaos magic is usually more kind of linked with kind of the darker kind of side of the magical spectrum and everything, but we had seen that Doctor Strange had to be asleep or his body knocked out to astral project and learn like this. She is able to be awake and do this at the same time, which is a pretty big differentiator, at least strength-wise, of what she's able to accomplish. Now, that doesn't mean that if it came down to things, that the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, wouldn't be able to effectively fight. Strength is not the only thing that makes or breaks a fight. If you don't know how to use your strength to its best advantages, you're not going to win that kind of fight. That's usually the Sorcerer Supreme's thing of like more kind of tactics and everything, though depending upon how the things kind of work out, there are certain powers or certain ways that the Sorcerer Supreme could kind of like up the kind of field. But if you've got Wanda, who has truly trained and really gotten into things, she is like one not to fuck with, essentially. But that, of course, she's like looking through and researching what's going on with the Darkhold as she then hears her children calling out to her. And we'll have to kind of see how that kind of works out, because it gets kind of messy in the comics, because Tommy and Billy are like fragments of Mephisto's soul, and Mephisto is the devil in the Marvel Universe. And Mephisto has not been introduced yet, so we'll kind of have to see what that means, if they're going to be tying that together or what's kind of going on there. Now, Wanda is next going to, well, to my knowledge, I know she's going to be teaming up in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And it would really be kind of cool, because I've seen them interact and everything in like the comics, and it would be kind of cool to see like how they kind of fit with each other. Like Strange trying to teach her certain things, and while he's trying to truly get into the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme, because we've seen him do a lot of things that him as the Sorcerer Supreme in the comic books have done, but I still think he has a lot of ways to kind of like get to that point, because granted, he has led magicians into the like biggest kind of fight ever against Thanos. I almost said Galactus. Fuck. So him and Wong do have that kind of elderly kind of thing going on in the magical realm. We also have Mordo walking around doing his kind of thing, and we'll have to see if he would deem if Mordo might have to like do something with Agatha to try and go after Wanda, because he would definitely see Wanda as a threat. So I'm really intrigued to see this opening up the magical side of the MCU. Now, there were the problems of certain things going on with like Vision and all that going on, and they could have utilized other things better and kind of tightened things up, in my opinion, because I could understand somebody looking at this and be like, what the fuck's going on with this sitcom thing? And kind of getting bored and piecing it out before like that pivotal 4th episode thing where you're like, I'm just watching rehashes and getting slightly creepy versions of certain sitcoms. I get that. But I liked that I think that there should have been other kind of ways that the mystery and the reveals had to have been interspersed, because then it leads to plot dumps. where you have a good amount of information that is delivered in the fourth episode that I think should have been sprinkled out more throughout what was going on. I'm like, if you're going to stick to a certain kind of episode number format, you really have to tighten up what's going on here. It was a little bit loose, even though I did enjoy it and did like what was going on. I'm like, oh, right, we got more stuff with Wanda and getting more involved into her character, because we haven't really gotten much with her because she'd mainly been in ensemble movies and everything going on that way. So it was nice to see this and get more deeply into her character and like her relationship with Vision and everything going on here. Yeah. So if you're really into the MCU, of course it would be a no-brainer to watch this. If you're really not into Wanda's character and the kind of magical, mystical side, I don't know if this would be for you. Now, the biggest barrier, of course, is, as I said, the whole sitcom thing that's in the beginning that then kind of pretty much backs away towards the end as we actually deal with the story of what's actually going on. So, your mileage may vary here. You could be like, watch the first episode and be like, but in all honesty, if you don't want to go through with that, I don't think you would have that much of a problem watching episode 4 to then understand what's kind of going on, see if you kind of want to know what's going on with the rest of it, because then the kind of sitcom stuff peters enough that you get what I think would have been the best balance of the story forward. It's kind of weird. I've never been able to be like, you know what? If you go into the halfway point of the show and just watch this episode, you're not really missing much, and you kind of get more into the story that you would probably see if you like or not. That's definitely weird. So, those are pretty much like my recommendations if you're feeling into it or not. So those are my opinions on this season. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.